The clock is relentlessly ticking. Right now, the world is holding its collective breath, watching a terrifying 48-hour ultimatum issued by the United States draw to a close. This isn't just another political dispute. This is a crisis that is actively pushing the Middle East, and by extension, the entire global economy, into a devastating and completely unpredictable vortex. The current situation is a chaotic mix of unprecedented military threats, a bloody escalation of violence, and an economic catastrophe that is just waiting to detonate. If it does, the consequences will alter the world as we know it. At the absolute center of this gathering storm is a place you might have heard of, but perhaps never fully realized its importance. It is the Strait of Hormuz. On a map, it looks like a narrow, unassuming waterway, but in reality, this specific stretch of water is the beating heart and the vital lifeblood of the entire global energy system. To understand the sheer gravity of this moment, we have to look at what happened this past Saturday. The President of the United States delivered a profoundly stark and uncompromising declaration. It was a direct, unambiguous threat. The order was given that if Iran does not immediately and fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping and oil tankers within a strict 48-hour window, the United States military will commence a comprehensive bombardment of Iran's power plants and critical energy infrastructure. This threat is not just a tactical maneuver. It is not just grand geopolitical posturing to win leverage at a negotiating table. It carries the immense, devastating weight of an all-out war. Think about what it actually means to level a nation's vital infrastructure. We are talking about effortlessly plunging tens of millions of civilians into total darkness. We are talking about stripping entire cities of electricity. Without power, you lose the fundamental energy required to sustain the most basic, life-saving necessities of modern human existence. Hospitals cannot run life support. Water purification plants shut down. Communications go dark. The human toll of such a strike would be catastrophic from the very first minute. Yet, faced with this colossal pressure from the world's preeminent military superpower, Tehran has not backed down. Instead, they have chosen a path of fierce and equally resolute defiance. Iranian state media has been broadcasting chilling warnings around the clock. They have made it unequivocally clear that if any part of their coastlines, sovereign islands, or mainland territories is subjected to an American attack, their military forces are fully prepared, heavily armed, and officially authorized to retaliate instantly. Their chosen method of retaliation is what has global markets in an absolute panic. Iran has threatened to deploy a massive, highly advanced network of naval mines across the entirety of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. If this countermeasure is realized, it would instantaneously transform one of the busiest and most strategically indispensable maritime corridors on the planet into a colossal, lethal minefield. It would establish an impenetrable no-go zone. No commercial oil tanker, and certainly no military vessel, could attempt passage without the severe risk of being blown out of the water. Mining this waterway transcends a mere act of tactical self-defense. It is a direct, calculated, and devastating strike at the very jugular of the global economy. To understand why, you need to understand the math of global energy. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow maritime choke point. At its narrowest, it is only about 21 miles wide, yet through this tiny bottleneck flows approximately 1/5 of the entire world's daily crude oil consumption. Let that sink in. 20% of the energy that powers the world's factories, fuels its airplanes, ships its cargo, and heats its homes passes through a stretch of water that is currently the focus of a massive military standoff. Any disruption at this critical juncture, no matter how brief, possesses the absolute potential to trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. The sheer gravity of this situation has forced the International Energy Agency, also known as the IEA, to sound an emergency alarm of historic proportions. Early Monday morning, the agency issued a grim and terrifying assessment. They unequivocally warned that the energy crisis currently confronting the world is poised to be significantly worse and more deeply structural than the infamous oil shocks of the 1970s. For a bit of historical context, the 1970s witnessed the global economy effectively paralyzed. The world grappled with runaway hyperinflation, widespread industrial stagnation, and crippling fuel shortages triggered by the Arab oil embargo. People waited in line for hours just to put a few gallons of gas in their cars. However, the geopolitical and economic landscape we live in today is exponentially more interconnected. It is more fragile, and it is far more perilous. We exist in a world of complex, modern, global supply chains that rely on just-in-time delivery. There is very little margin for error. The profound, unyielding reliance of both advanced and developing economies on a continuous, uninterrupted flow of fossil fuels means that a disruption today hits harder and faster than it did 50 years ago. Combine this fragility with the sheer destructive capability of modern precision weaponry, and the scenario of a prolonged Middle Eastern supply disruption becomes a literal waking nightmare for policymakers and average citizens worldwide. The panic is not theoretical, it is already happening. When you observe the immediate aftermath of the IEA's dire warnings, combined with the escalating political rhetoric, the sheer panic seizing global financial centers is palpable. It is escalating by the minute. As trading floors opened on Monday, Asian stock markets experienced a violent, uncontrolled plunge. Investors were gripped by absolute terror. They began a massive, indiscriminate sell-off of assets. They watched in horror as the United States and Iran spent the entire weekend trading explicit, reciprocal threats to obliterate each other's energy facilities. Money managers know that if the oil stops flowing, the global economy grinds to a devastating halt. The hemorrhaging of the Asian markets is widely viewed by top financial analysts not as an isolated incident, but as a terrifying prologue. It is the start of a domino effect that is rapidly sweeping westward. It is threatening to engulf the major financial hubs of Europe and the Americas in a tsunami of economic panic. Trillions of dollars in wealth could be wiped out in a matter of days. Accompanying the freefall of global market indices are the deeply unsettling, highly visible manifestations of civilian dread. Long, desperate queues of anxious citizens snaking around fuel stations have already begun to materialize across various nations. People are panic buying fuel, jarringly evoking the darkest memories of the energy rationing that defined the crisis half a century ago. This pervasive psychological terror of an imminent, prolonged energy deficit is doing immediate damage. It is actively strangling consumer confidence. People who are terrified about the future do not spend money. It is paralyzing corporate investment. Companies will not build new factories or hire new workers if they believe the global supply chain is about to collapse. This combination of fear and financial instability is threatening to drag the post-pandemic global economy into a deep, agonizing, and protracted recession, exactly at a time when the world can least afford it. But the economic terror is only one half of the story. As the countdown continues, the reality on the ground in the Middle East is shifting from a war of words to a landscape of terrifying kinetic action. The human cost is already mounting, and the conflict is threatening to spill over borders that have held for peace for decades. The devastating reality of this standoff goes far beyond economic panic and stock market crashes. We are watching a staggering human tragedy unfold in real time. Verified reports out of the region confirm that the death toll across Iran and Lebanon has already skyrocketed into the thousands. Lebanon is a nation already suffocating under a historic economic collapse. Now, it finds itself dragged into the ruthless vortex of this regional warfare. Relentless airstrikes and cross-border artillery are reducing residential neighborhoods and vital medical facilities to rubble. Countless innocent civilians are hopelessly trapped in the crossfire. At the same time, the war is expanding deep into sovereign territories. State-controlled media in Iran report that fierce aerial bombardments have directly struck Tehran. A heavily fortified capital city coming under direct military assault proves this is no longer a localized border skirmish. It is a lethal strike at the very heart of the combatant nations, and the chaos refuses to stay contained. Saudi Arabia, the heavyweight champion of global oil exports and a key American ally, is now bracing for impact. Early Monday, the Saudi military intercepted and destroyed 2 high-velocity ballistic missiles in mid-flight. Their intended target was the densely populated capital city of Riyadh. This was a stark, terrifying demonstration of aggressive intent from Iran or its heavily armed proxies. Had those missiles hit Riyadh, the catastrophic loss of life would have instantly triggered a massive military retaliation from Saudi Arabia and its Western allies. That would be the point of no return, plunging the entire Middle East into an all-out regional war. Today, the Middle East is a colossal, highly unstable powder keg. Diverse political factions, paramilitaries, and massive standing armies are on the highest red alert. Fingers are hovering dangerously over the trigger. Because of deeply intertwined defense pacts and centuries-old animosities, diplomatic intervention faces almost insurmountable odds. Humanitarian organizations are risking their lives to deliver food, water, and medicine to millions of terrified refugees. But the crisis is outpacing the aid. Meanwhile, the leadership in both Washington, D.C. and Tehran remains entrenched in dangerous brinkmanship. There are no whispers of retreat, no signs of de-escalation. The clock on the American president's 48-hour ultimatum is counting down its final agonizing hours. The world is terrified of what happens next. Will the United States actually execute a full-scale bombardment of Iranian power facilities? And if that red line is crossed, how ferociously will Iran retaliate in the Strait of Hormuz and against American allies? Military strategists are unified in their grim prediction. Once direct attacks occur between the US and Iran under these conditions, containment will be impossible. It will spark a devastating theater-wide war, dragging in global superpowers and permanently fracturing global security. It threatens to violently redraw the map of global energy and plunge human civilization into a dark era of economic depression. Time has practically run out. The decisions made by a handful of individuals in the next few hours will irrevocably dictate the fate, security, and prosperity of billions of lives worldwide. What do you think will happen when the countdown finally reaches zero? Will last-minute diplomacy pull the world back from the brink? Or are we witnessing the dawn of a devastating new global conflict? Drop your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments section below so we can discuss them. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay updated on this rapidly unfolding crisis, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on the notification bell.